起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位点传师一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
And welcome everybody to another just plain gorgeous Sunday. Let me see if I can find where my mouse went. There we go. Well, as you can see from the slides that are flittering around on my screen right now, today's topic is finding balance. The last several weeks we've talked about various aspects of Tao cultivation from a somewhat pragmatic point of view, if you will. And this is yet another in that line of thought. Finding balance for all of us is a huge part of Tao cultivation. You don't find it explicitly stated in the Tao Te Ching. The word balance actually doesn't appear in the text. But an awful lot of the intent, the meaning, the essence behind what Lao Tzu writes has a lot to do with that very thing, finding balance in our lives, making sure that we're moderate and avoiding the extremes of existence. Sometime back, I'm thinking it's been maybe 2 years ago, I did a series of talks on chapter 32 of the Tao Te Ching. This is one of my personal favorites. This chapter, it just speaks to me. And so often, it's the case that when we go back and reread chapters from the Tao Te Ching, as we grow and mature in Tao cultivation, that we see and hear things, that we gain understanding we didn't have before. We're able to look at the words in a different perspective, from a different point of view, from a perhaps wider point of view. And I recalled while I was preparing this week's talk that we'd done this chapter before in a couple of different ways, and it kind of gave me a moment to pause there to consider the time I've spent walking this path. Chapter 32 starts out, the Tao eternally nameless, its simplicity, although imperceptible, cannot be treated by the world as subservient. If the sovereign can hold on to it, all will follow by themselves. Heaven and earth together in harmony will rain sweet dew. People will not need to force it. It will adjust by itself. In the beginning there were names. Names came to exist everywhere. One should know when to stop, knowing when to stop, thus avoiding danger. The existence of the Tao in the world is like streams in the valley into rivers and the ocean. I don't know why this particular chapter is so profound to me, perhaps beyond many others. This and a couple of chapters coming up. But the thought of heaven and earth together, raining down sweet dew, for me is just a really cool mental picture. It's if you will, for me, that mental image of spring, the renewal of life, the renewal of the earth, and the renewal of the spirit, all of the things that pop up fresh and renewed after a long cold winter. And I truly enjoy that. There are a couple of key concepts in this chapter. One of them is the ultimate simplicity of the Tao. And As people, we spend an awful lot of time overthinking, overcomplicating, overacting, just making things way too doggone complex, way too heavy, way too weighty on us. We cause ourselves all kinds of anxiety and stress by not backing off to the simpler and less complex way of thinking and seeing things. And the more that we do that, the more difficult it becomes over time to recognize the fact that that's what we're doing. It becomes difficult to disengage the mind from the extremes and excesses of day-to-day life. And so every now and again, it's a good thing to step back and take a look at that. One of the things that Derek and I have both talked about fairly frequently over time is reducing the clutter in our lives. And yeah, there's a literal interpretation of that says, pardon me, that reducing the clutter around one's home, the stuff we don't need anymore, not hanging on to junk, is a good and beneficial thing to do. But that, in and of itself, has yet a deeper meaning for going through the garages, closets, and cubby holes in our minds and hearts and reducing the clutter there as well. Getting rid of the overcomplications, the outdated modes of thinking, the dysfunctional ways of thinking, okay, those sorts of things. It is creating the simplicity referred to by Lao Tzu, right? Excuse me. And so when we step back to take a look at whether or not we're truly living a harmonious and balanced life, perhaps one of the things we can look at is, are we reducing the clutter? Are we hoarding things that we don't need, both physically and metaphysically and spiritually? Are we hanging on to those dysfunctional and ineffective ways of thinking, ways of doing things that don't work for us? As human beings, we tend to fall back to the things that we think are comfortable, the things we know and understand when we're faced with situations we're not sure how to deal with, or when we're stressed or under pressure. Very often those modes of thinking are not really effective for us, but we don't know any other way to do things. So if we're hanging on to those sorts of things, that's clutter to be removed. We can examine the diet. And okay, you know, people may not think of what we put in our bodies as being an essential part of simplifying life and uncluttering life, but it absolutely is. If we're putting all sorts of stuff in our body that's loaded with preservatives, trans fats, and crud, we're not ever going to feel our best. If we do that to the extreme, if we find that we're eating a third of our meals at a McDonald's every day, or some such equivalent, that's probably something we need to change in the interests of being healthier. I can kind of speak to that firsthand, both having gone through the Chinkoa and being diabetic. I can tell you that by and large, a vegetarian diet is wonderful for diabetes. While I have a long history of diabetes in my family, most everyone else was treated with insulin. I'm treated with medication. I'm not insulin dependent, and a huge part of that is due to my diet. I watch the sugars I consume, the amount of sugars I consume, and when I consume them, and I don't eat things that aggravate that condition. We also have to look at the extremes. that we hang on to? Are we volatile? Are we given over to knee-jerk reactions, to reacting without thinking when things happen to us? Are we able to step back and look at life situations in a wider, more encompassing scope, or not? Do we moderate our desires, or are we driven by the need to keep up with the Joneses? Do we have a garage full of every conceivable toy that we can get our hands on, or do we just have what we need? You know, I I have my Honda Odyssey that I've had since 2002. It's got 150 some odd thousand miles on it, and yeah, it's getting a mite long in the tooth, but it's paid for. It runs really well. It's been well maintained, and I don't really need a new one. I would really just as soon not take on another car payment if I don't have to. And so every now and again, when I see that new BMW go by, or a new Porsche, or somebody else's brand of a sports car, or I watch like the new Tesla sports car that's been introduced on TV, I have that moment of thought in my mind where I say I'd really like to have one of those. But what I have is infinitely utilitarian. It accommodates my entire family, and it's paid for. I absolutely do not need a $250,000 sports car that I can barely sit in. That's the moderation of the desires. All of those things depend on our ability to be introspective, to look at what we're doing, how we're thinking, how we're progressing, and do that honestly to get to the point where we can truly judge whether or not our life within ourselves is harmonious, whether or not we're actually stepping from the true self to the ego self to the outside self in a moderate and harmonious manner. We can look for the reign of sweet dew in our own life. You know, miracles are everywhere if we choose to see them. Happiness and contentedness and peacefulness is available to all people, simply for the asking and the doing. It's not difficult. It simply requires a shift in thought processes and a desire to be more moderate and less extreme in our lives. When you live in a culture where extremism is the norm, where the philosophy is the guy that dies with the most toys wins, it's very, very easy to get caught up in. It's very easy to lose sight of the amount of pressure and stress that puts on us, and it's really easy to get stuck on that treadmill of acquisition and desire, but definitely not appropriate. There's balance through the creation of harmony. This is a huge topic in cultivation. It is. Harmonious relationships, a harmonious life, a peaceful, joyful life. These things are the goals that we strive for. These are very largely, for most of us, a big part of the reasons we cultivate the Tao teachings to begin with. Well, okay, we have the ability to both create and nurture harmony. We can create it in our own relationships and nurture it in others. And so as we're being introspective, as we're taking a look at where our lives are going and how we're doing and whether or not we're content and happy and peaceful, once again, we can examine that part of our lives and see whether or not we are able to create the reign of sweet dew. Are our relationships with other people harmonious? Within our homes, within our workplaces, with our friends, with people that are acquaintances, or even people we just run into? Are our interactions with other people easy and fairly stress-free and natural? Or are they contrived and guarded and cautious? Do we, when we encounter other people, feel anxious or that something's not quite right? Are we worrying about what we might say or what we might think, or who we might offend? If so, are we contriving what we're doing in the hopes of appearing virtuous without actually achieving the natural state? Once again, are we prone to volatility? Are we hot-headed? Are we judgmental? Do we react quickly and with force and without thought? Those are things all to be moderated. It doesn't mean that we can't have a strong opinion or belief on a particular topic. We absolutely can. But the manner in which we approach and express it can be done in a way that doesn't cause ill will or tension between people. And in paying attention to whether or not we're creating tension and unease, we can sort of back into, if you will, creating and nurturing that harmony. At some point, we will get to the point where instead of worrying about who we're offending or what we might say or do, we begin to create that harmony simply because it's a part of it. I've been cultivating the Tao teachings now for a lot of years, and when I first started, I was very cautious about what I did, what I said, how I did it. Those things caused me a lot of anxiety. I was anxious about my size and about how my presence might affect other people. But over the years, that fear has matured into a way of doing things that naturally puts most other people at ease, where I overcome my size with softness and the desire not to cause offense or unease with an almost instinctive ability to hear what the other person's really saying and respond to that in a way that's not only unoffensive but actually helpful. It's an internal change in being that's the direct result of the cultivation of the Tao teachings. I'm not sure that I can explain how it works, but in hindsight, I know that it does. I can see the changes evidenced by the transformation of my mind and my spirit. In point of fact, the ability to create and nurture harmonious relationships is for me one of the absolute wonders of Tao cultivation. I don't feel on a day-to-day basis like I've changed at all, but the people around me tell me that I'm different. It happens here. Derek says it from time to time. You know, all these years I've always just considered myself to be me, but me has been transformed and continues to be transformed by the path of Tao cultivation. For me, that has become probably the biggest part of what Lao Tzu calls the rain of sweet dew. We can find balance through the use of the Tao teachings. At the end of chapter 32, Lao Tzu says that it's like the streams in a valley flowing into the river and then to the ocean. Do things flow through our lives like water, or do they stop in our homes like the river's been dammed up? Life that has room for the rain of sweet dew has a natural flow and equilibrium associated with it in all things: physical, metaphysical, spiritual, mental. Our lives are a mirror of what's going on inside of us, our thought processes, our. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are back now.
How long was I gone for?
About a minute.
On this slide?
On slide 8, correct.
I apologize. I got a message that says I lost my audio.
Okay.
Sorry for the technical interruption. We'll pick it up here.
No problem. Please proceed.
Thank you, sir. So anyway, technical difficulties notwithstanding, if the natural flow of the Tao exists in our lives, in and out, both things and everything else, then we're doing okay. Do we know when to stop? Prior to the lines regarding the streams into the river and the ocean, it says that, names came into existence and names were everywhere. That we should know when to stop, and by knowing when to stop, avoid danger, avoid problems. Not knowing when to stop, no matter what it is we don't know what to stop about, is a problem. My son Aaron has Asperger's syndrome, and one of the symptoms of that is a certain amount of social dysfunction that requires a bit of work from time to time to master for him. And one of the huge problems he has with that is not knowing when a joke's over. So he'll say something that's funny and then take 10 minutes to explain it. We all do things like that. We don't often think about our speech as being something we should know when to stop with. That's something we usually take for granted, but absolutely it's something that we should learn to control, to know what should be said, how much should be said, and when to be quiet. One of the most humbling experiences I ever had in my life occurred in a 3-sentence conversation. Our speech is unbelievably powerful and has the ability to do both great good and great harm. Do we know when to stop acquiring things, or do we stop when we run out of money? Not knowing when to stop can cause calamities and problems in our lives that we can be forced to deal with sometimes for years. Are we content and happy with our lives? That doesn't mean that every day is a day at Disney World, but in general, are we happy with where our life is and where it's going? And the things that we want to change, where we want to grow more, where we want to mature more, where we're hoping to apply the teachings perhaps a little better. Are we making progress? Are we fearful on a day-to-day basis, anxious, worried, stressed? Or do we have peace? Now, no life ever goes by without a certain amount of both. But a balanced life is going to have at least as much joy and peace and tranquility in it as it has anxiety, and hopefully a lot more. By achieving the natural virtuous state of Tao cultivation, the need to be anxious and fearful, even when bad things happen to us shouldn't really exist. Maybe for a moment or two. And so how we handle bad news becomes a signpost to us as to how we're progressing in the cultivation of the teachings. Likewise, how we handle good news is also an indicator. Are we ecstatic and overjoyed when we get good news and crushingly depressed when we hear bad? Do we swing from one extreme of thinking and feeling to the other? If so, we've not found the balance. Perhaps more importantly than anything is, do we feel that we're creating that rain of sweet dew for ourselves and for those people around us? If so, it's obvious. And it's taken me several years to figure this part out. That no matter what happens around me, by and large, everything's okay. That we are each directly responsible for whether or not we create that rain of sweet dew, that harmony, that joyfulness for ourselves and as much as we can for those around us. We can't control the thoughts and minds and hearts of other people, but we can control how we choose to react to them, what we say to them, how we feel about them, whether or not we judge them or have prejudice in our hearts. All of those things have an effect on the people around us that can allow them to experience that rain of sweet dew for themselves simply by following the teachings to the point where we're doing it for ourselves. I tell people from time to time that it's a fundamental tenet of Tao cultivation that we take care of ourselves first so that we can sustain taking care of and helping others. And a lot of times people look at me and say, isn't that kind of self-centered or selfish? Isn't that an extremism all in itself, that you look out for you and your family and then go about helping others? And well, I've been asked often enough that I have an explanation for that I think actually works. If I don't take care of myself and my family, I'm not able to take care of anyone else. My wife and I are able to do the things that we do for others because we take care of our family and each other. Understanding that key point is an essentiality to tapping into that rain of sweet dew and to finding balance. To do anything to the exclusion of something else breaks that balance and makes having the rain of sweet dew difficult, if not impossible. Got about 2 minutes and hopefully no further audio problems. We'll kind of tie it up here. Finding balance it's a frequently spoken of but not always well understood portion of Tao cultivation. We talk about it all the time, but we don't often talk about how to recognize it, how to find it, and how to create it. And it's important that we do that. A balanced life is a sign of a life lived in the Tao teachings. Even if a person's not a professing cultivator of the Tao, a person with a well-balanced life is most likely adhering to the same principles that we adhere to achieve the same goal. Excessive desires, too much stuff, extremes of a thought or action are a sign that there are some things that need to change, that there's not balance there, that the extremes are still buffeting us from one side to the other and up and down. And finding balance is essential to mastering the self and cultivating the Tao teachings to whatever the ultimate extent we can achieve is. without understanding how to live a balanced and moderate life, we're forever a victim of our own lack of understanding and our own inability to see things the way they really are. And so, with ourselves being the sovereign spoken of in chapter 32, if we can hold on to the Tao, if we can put these teachings into practice and good use, heaven and earth together in harmony will rain sweet dew for all of us. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and it's a joy to see you all here. Thank you.
Bill, thank you very much. I really do appreciate you setting the tone, for the entire DAO meeting. And it kind of brings me to mind what you and I had talked about before, you being sort of the vanguard, a role to which you are destined to play. And while there's already been a lot of changes in your life, I also want to reiterate that and I know that there's still quite a few things that you are still working on, and you know what those areas are. It's stuff that we have discussed, and so reflecting on those can keep us humble and on the path. So
humble in particular.